Hi friends, my name is Luen, and today I'm bringing you my wrap up for the month of December, and I'm also going to include the one book that I read in November since I didn't actually do a wrap up for that month. Let me jump right into my wrap up, starting with the one book that I read in November, and that was Unblemished by Sara. This was my second read through because I was lucky enough to snag an arc. This book follows a main character in a parallel version of New York that is like a fairy tale world, and you get to see the really awesome parallels between the two, and she is a key factor in overturning this revolution and war in this parallel New York City that is actually called The Reflection. I think one of the coolest things about this book is it was very reminiscent of The 10th Kingdom, which was one of my absolute favorite TV shows growing up, and it's also very reminiscent of Once Upon a Time. I think I got that title right. I haven't seen that in a while, but it's very fairy tale-esque. You can see a lot of the influence that fairy tale stories had on this, but it still stands alone as its own novel. Overall, I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I thought it was really fun. The pacing was a little bit slower for me, but there's a lot of world building, which is expected in the first book in a fantasy series. So if you enjoy world building, this is definitely something that I think you'll have a lot of fun with, and there's a lot of introduction to characters. Moving on to my December reads, I started off the month with Monstress Volume 1 by Marjorie M. Tekada, and Russ Wooten, and this was a really interesting graphic novel. I thought the illustrations were absolutely beautiful. I really enjoyed that this was a very female-driven graphic novel where you have this really great list of complex female characters from like good all the way to evil, and it's just this really awesome spectrum of characters that are in between that. I do have to say that this graphic novel was quite violent and there was some nudity, but I felt like it was done in such a respectful way. It definitely wasn't for the male gaze, which I really enjoyed because I just felt like I wasn't like icky after I read it. So I did want to kind of put that out there as a disclaimer. This is more of an adult graphic novel, not something that I would recommend for younger readers. So just putting that disclaimer out there. The artwork was beautiful, the storyline was very complicated, and I'm still left a little curious about how some things are going to play out, but I think that that was done in a way that creates interest to get into the next volume instead of creating a lot of confusion, if that makes sense. I ended up giving this a 4 out of 5 stars. The next 3 graphic novels that I picked up were volumes 1, 2, and 3 of Avatar: The Last Airbender: The Search, and this follows Zuko's search for his mother, and I have to say that I absolutely loved this installation to this series. It is authored by Luen Yang, and he does such a fantastic job of breathing new life into this series, which I absolutely loved when it was a television series, and I have been so happy with how it has continued with the graphic novel series that Luen Yang has made with the creators of Avatar: The Last Airbender universe. It was so fantastic. If you have ever wondered what happened with Zuko going to find his mother, you need to check this out. It's so good. We get to see some old characters. So there is a reintroduction of the character Azula, who had a pretty sticky end in the series and kind of gets reintroduced, and we get to see like a new storyline with her that's really, really interesting. I gave volume 1 4 stars, volume 2 4 stars, and volume 3 5 stars, and I really enjoyed them. The next book that I picked up was Georgia Peaches and Other Forbidden Fruit by J. Robin Brown. I do have a 5 reasons to read, which y'all should check out because this book was so good. It follows a main character named Jo who is moving from a larger town to a smaller town where she has to hide her sexual identity for her safety and to, as her dad puts it, to kind of not rock the boat as they're transitioning into a new family where he just married his 3rd wife, and her family isn't very open to anything pretty much. And one of my absolute favorite things about this book is the discussion of sexuality and religion and having faith and not feeling bad about yourself when you have both of those things, when you identify on the LGBT plus spectrum, but you also believe in God. And that's something that I haven't seen a lot of, especially in a southern setting. So seeing that in this book was really fantastic, and it was executed well, and the characters were amazing. There's a really cute fluffy romance in here that is just so shippable. Yeah, I won't talk too much more about it because I do have a video that is dedicated to it, but I ended up giving this a 5 out of 5 stars, and it was fantastic. So I really wanted to pick up March volumes 1, 2, and 3. I only ended up getting to volumes 1 and 2 by John C. Lewis. This was a really interesting look at the civil rights movement that kind of were initiated and led by Martin Luther King Jr., but also focusing on John C. Lewis's role in the civil rights movement. And it was really interesting. I liked how in-depth he got about their methods and the different protests that they led. I thought that it was definitely an insightful look and something that I hadn't seen really detailed in any of my history classes. So seeing this from someone who was there, who participated and who helped lead that movement was so interesting. I really liked how he focused on where they learned how to protest and how they were very focused on peaceful protest and how they kind of trained to reactions around those, because in all honesty, while their end of the protest was incredibly peaceful, unfortunately the people who were oppressing them did not react in peaceful ways, and seeing how they dealt with that was heartbreaking and inspiring at the same time. I gave volume 1 a 4 out of 5 stars and volume 2 a 5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I picked up was an audiobook, and that was To All the Boys I Loved Before by Jenny Han. I really enjoyed this one. It was just cutesy. I didn't have high expectations for it because I was nervous that it was going to be too cutesy, too naive. I've heard a lot of criticism about the main character being too naive and unlikable and that most people didn't enjoy her. And then I've heard other people say that she's just a cinnamon roll character and they absolutely loved her, and I'm kind of in that later camp. I think that Lara Jean is this really cute, adorable teenage character, and that she represents an innocence that some teenagers have, and I think that it's important to have representations of all kinds of different kids in young adult literature because they all exist. So I did enjoy that aspect. I thought that it was a cutesy story, and while there wasn't a lot of depth to the original plotline with the letters being sent out, which was a disappointment, I felt like the love story that kind of bloomed in this book was nice. I ended up giving it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. And then I read The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. Thank you so much, Caitlin from Book Chats, for connecting me with someone who had an arc and was willing to send it to me so I can read it. I do not want to say too much about this book because we are still 2 months out from the release date, and I don't want to give anything important away, so I'll just leave it at this. It is a young adult contemporary inspired by the Black Lives Matter movement, and it is going to challenge your views on many different things, and it is going to confront racism up front. It does not throw any punches. It's just straight out there, laid out bare, and you're gonna have to confront that when you read this. I ended up giving it a 5 out of 5 stars, and Angie Thomas is such a brilliant writer. The way that she wrote Star's voice was so wonderful, and I can't wait to read everything else that she writes. I listened to another audiobook this month, and that was City of Glass by Cassandra Clare. This is the 3rd installment in the Mortal Instruments series, and at this point in the series I've decided I'm not going to continue on with this. Let me know in the comment section below if I can pick up Lady Midnight with just doing kind of like a brief synopsis of what happens in the rest of the series. I decided not to continue on with this because I honestly don't enjoy the characters. I am not in love with the plot line. I felt that a lot of it was predictable, and I started this book and I called up one of my friends who has read the series, and I was just like, hey, is this what is going to happen? And she's like, yeah. Which is something that I was just like, I'm gonna be so annoyed if this happens. So I have personally decided not to continue on with it because it's just not for me. I'm glad that other people love this series so much, but Cassandra Clare is kind of hit and miss with me. Loved the Infernal Devices trilogy, really liked the Magisterium trilogy. Not a big fan of the Infernal Devices, so I still want to give Lady Midnight a try because, like I said, Cassandra Clare is hit and miss with me. I don't want to completely put off anything she writes, because I have liked some of the things that she's contributed to the literary world. I'm not going to give this a rating because I don't think that it is important for me to give it a rating if it's a book that I just didn't personally enjoy. No reason to give it a low star rating when I feel kind of meh about the whole thing. I picked up one book for 12 days of diverse retelling, which I had high ambitions for. I thought I was going to read 7 books. That didn't happen, but it did pick up Where the Mountain Meets the Moon by Grace Lynn, and this was so beautiful. This was such a cute middle grade novel that follows a main character who goes out on an adventure to change the fate of her family and her village, and she just meets a lot of really awesome characters along the way. And we also get an introduction to some fables along the way that tie together to the entire storyline. There are beautiful illustrations in this book, and it was just the most delightful read. I can definitely say that this is the book that, out of all the books I read this year, I just walked away just feeling so happy and so at peace, and it just really transported me from this world into her world. And it is rare when a book can do that completely, that when I put it down, I just feel like so happy and light and just okay with the world. I ended up giving this a 5 out of 5 stars, and it was fantastic. And the final book that I finished in December was My Lady Jane by Cynthia Han, Jodi Meadows, and Brody Ashton, and I have been reading this since my honeymoon in August. And it's not that it's a bad book. This is a historical fiction that is told in a quirky manner that is very similar to The Princess Bride, and it follows 3 main characters. So King Edward, you know, I finished this a couple days ago and now I can't even fully remember. Gifford is the other character, and then Jane ends up inheriting the throne, and then someone tries to overthrow it and they have to figure out a way to get it back. And this wasn't a bad book, but there was a lot of influence from other pop culture references that were thrown in there that I think some readers might enjoy, but it just kind of took me out of the story. The way that the book was narrated wasn't my favorite, so I am kind of in the middle on this one because it was a decent story, but its execution wasn't something that I found very enjoyable. So I did end up giving this a 3 out of 5 stars, and I think that if you like the way that The Princess Bride was narrated, and you like seeing pop culture references thrown into your reading, and you like a narration that doesn't take itself too seriously, this is definitely something that you should pick up, and I think you would probably enjoy. Anyway, that has been it for today's wrap up. I read a total of 12 things in December, 1 thing in November, which I think is pretty good. I end up meeting my reading goal for the end of the year of 100 books by reading 104 or 105, now I can't recall, but I definitely met my reading challenge goal. This year I have set myself a lower goal so I don't feel as rushed to read as many books, so I have set a goal of 52 books, which averages out to be 1 book a week, which is very doable for me. And if I read more than that, that's awesome. If I don't, oh well. I'll leave links in the down bar below for you guys to follow me on my other social media sites such as Goodreads, Instagram, and Twitter. And thank you all so much for watching. Stay weird.